All right, everybody, welcome back to Strangers Worth Meeting. I'm on the road still, as always, and once again, I'm in San Antonio, Texas, which has turned out to be one of my favorite spots. Been having a lot of fun out here, and today on the podcast, I've got something exciting. We've got Oliver Adamson, who is the owner of Citizen Build, and is a metal worker. Would that be an accurate way to put it, metal worker, or is it too simple?
No,
architect?
No, metalworkers.
Metalworker, okay. Out here in San Antonio. And we just met up and we're hanging out at his shop and just got some carnitas down the road. And I had a beer. You didn't have a beer. You're not much of a drinker?
I drank, but not too much. Just kind of lay low on it.
I see. I really like how the podcast is turning into just local people inviting me to the best local spots, and then I get to drink beer and eat the good food.
Yeah.
What a good excuse I've got to do that. Man, it really works out.
Yeah, that's one of San Antonio's hidden gems too.
Yeah, and you were telling me kind of that, you see this city growing, and obviously we've got Austin, like an hour to the north of here probably, and so the whole area has experienced a lot of growth, but it was kind of cool to hear from you kind of the difference between what you feel about San Antonio growing versus Austin growing. Can you kind of tell us a little about that?
Yeah, the nice thing about San Antonio is it's super rich in culture, and even with the growth, that doesn't kind of diminish, which is awesome to see. I actually lived here 9 years ago for a year, and then I left to Austin. So when I came back, it was pretty much it had grown, but it was pretty much the same place.
Right, you've seen a little bit of both, kind of.
Yeah,
you can kind of tell the difference here. Cool, man. Well, I'm excited today because obviously you recently had on. I think that when this comes out, it will be 2 episodes ago. I had an interview with woodworker Ford up in Cloudcroft, New Mexico, and I felt like that's only half the question. We've got woodworking. Let's get into the metalworking side of things.
Best of both worlds.
Yeah, absolutely. And he told me some things about metalworking that made it seem like it was for sissies, and so no. But we did kind of talk about the difference, and that was kind of fun. And so I'm kind of excited to hear about it. So we've obviously been catching up already, so you'll have to forgive me if I just say things that I've already said as we were sitting around. You just pretend like I didn't, I guess. But I do want to know some of the basics so that people can kind of have that story of you and how you came to be doing what you're doing here in San Antonio. So I mean, what brings someone to the world of metalworking, and then how do you decide to kind of open your own place?
So growing up, my dad was always in the garage working on cars, and he did a lot of the sheet metal side of things. So he'd buy old restored cars and kind of bring them back to life, and part of that was welding. So when I was growing up, I was always seeing him coming in the house with overalls, just covered in grease, and it was always a super foreign thing for me to see, and just to understand how what he was doing in there.
Right.
And then as I got older, I'd go out there and see him welding, and I just thought that was the coolest thing ever.
Yeah. Welding's complicated for an adult to understand too, because you're how are we fusing 2 metals together?
Yeah, you're literally and it's crazy. So the first time he showed me how to weld, I was hooked. And the reason I was hooked is because of the process is so intricate. When you have a welding hood on, it's almost like you're in a different world. All you can see is, everything is black. It looks, it looks like it's nighttime outside. Apart from this little bead of weld that you're looking at, so you're extremely zoned in and in the moment, and that was probably one of the biggest things I liked, and still do. And plus, you're literally fusing metal together. So as soon as you learn how to weld, you can build anything out of metal. So it kind of opens up a lot of doors.
Yeah.
So I grew up watching him do that and kind of learning a few basics from him.
I like what you said about it too. Like for anybody who hasn't done any welding, and I probably made 5 welds in college as part of a course I was taking on set building and stuff like that. And so you put that hood on, you're totally blind. Like
Oh,
you're
yeah.
so blind because no light would be possibly able to get through. Because if you look right at the weld you're making, it'll damage the hell out of your eyes.
Right.
You really have to not be able to see anything.
Yeah, and it's really crazy if you're welding for an hour, 2 hours at a time, and you're lifting your hood up intermittently, but not say you're welding for 2 hours, you're kind of in the zone, and then when you finish, you take your hood off, and then you look outside, and because it's like you've been in like a dark room for the past 2 hours, and you look out and it's super bright. It kind of feels like you've been in your own world for like the past 2 hours, which is super meditative. Like
No, I mean my new obsession is like isolation tanks. I haven't gotten a chance to do one yet.
Oh, there's one here in San Antonio.
Yeah, I know there's there's a bunch because it's taken off, but and obviously like Austin, San Antonio is the epicenter of all the new health crazes, whatever. So I'm totally obsessed with the idea of that, and I really want to go try one.
Yeah.
As soon as I possibly can. But it almost sounds like that's what you're getting kind of when you're there. Do you listen to music or anything like that, or do you just keep it real?
Actually, the other thing about welding is a lot of it is on a tempo. So if you have a tempo in your head, that may, especially with TIG welding, there's three different main types of welding, and one of them is TIG, and that one requires a lot of hand-eye coordination and tempo. So if you're listening to music while TIG welding, that creates a tempo that you can kind of flow to, and that really kind of helps you out a lot. So listening to music.
What kind of music is that? We should make a playlist for people.
Yeah.
Hey, TIG welders.
In the shop, we listen to a lot of classic country, I guess, like Hank Williams and George Jones.
Yeah. Nice, easy beat.
Just nice, slow tempo.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's definitely a different world inside the hood.
Yeah, I can believe it. Okay, so I keep throwing us off track, which I mentioned is the point. For us to totally go off track. But so Dad did a lot of welding, and was Dad your hero?
I don't know.
It's always a complicated question. I think especially asking men that question
especially
is real
if he's
difficult.
listening,
Do you think he will? That'd be fun. My dad always listens.
I don't know. He just got an iPhone, so I'm not too sure if he.
Be a good place to start. Like,
I'd have to like show him, be like, hey, this is where you listen to this. And click play for him.
But was that so? You see, I mean, he comes in looking like a superhero with his mask on, and he's in the coveralls, and like, he's built something. That's gotta be a sight to behold.
Yeah, he was definitely the kind of dad where like if you had anything that was broken, and like we talked about before, I rode BMX for all of my childhood, and it's pretty aggressive on your bicycle. So I was having parts constantly break, and he'd instead of me buying a new part on my allowance, which was not much at all, he would fix it for me, and I always thought that was super cool. But my granddad was a carpenter also, so it's kind of in the family name, as far as like working with your hands. And I always, as a kid, I always kind of felt out of it in that realm, because at that point, that like seeing everything that he would build as far as like cars, and I mean, still to this day, it's pretty crazy the stuff he does. And in that sense, yeah, he's definitely a hero for sure. He's a super talented, smart guy. So.
And where did you grow up?
I was born in Cincinnati, and then my parents are British, so we spent some time in England.
I like how you mentioned that like a side note, like it wouldn't blow my mind. Like, wait, your parents are British?
Yep, yeah, so they're...
British citizens?
Yeah, they live over there right now. And I only moved out here 10 years ago I was in college in Brighton, England, which is just south of London. And the day of my graduation, I missed, and kind of just had $500 in my back pocket and just flew out here to Austin. Well, out to Austin at that point, and then stayed on friends' floors and kind of made it work.
I feel like we could do a whole episode just on this backstory that I'm trying to piece together. Wait, so did you grow up mostly in the UK?
Yeah, mostly in the UK.
You don't have an accent.
Yeah,
which
I get that a lot. You know,
you
like,
get an accent from like maybe 5 to 8, somewhere in there. You develop it from your schoolmates or something.
That's the thing. I feel like when I was that age, it was probably like half and half. But it's so hard to say because you're not like, you know, when you're younger, you're not like, I have an accent.
You're totally not
cognizant
of it.
And even now, like people, especially from England, will be like, man, you don't even sound British anymore.
Right.
And I'm like, I don't know. It just kind of happened, you know?
Yeah. Oh, that's okay.
But and I feel like my accent before, it's not like it was. There's a lot of accents in England, and there's a lot of strong accents in England. Mine was pretty, like in the South, it's pretty subtle. Like it's not like a harsh like thing, but yeah.
Do you still bust out like some phrases?
Well, that's
or
the thing.
slang,
like a lot of the guys in the shop, like Alan, will, make fun of some things. Like he'll catch like me saying against or whilst, or like little things like that. And I'm like, okay, yeah.
Right. Okay, so not your typical Texas success story, but a success story nonetheless. And so you've come to the U.S. Why did you come over then? What was the draw for you? Well, were you dual? Must have been a dual citizen.
Well, yeah, I'm dual. So ever since we left, I always kind of wanted to move back to the States. So when I was finishing college, everyone I went to college with were all getting jobs in like London, and I definitely didn't want to move to London just because it's pretty expensive over there. And I definitely didn't want to move back to where my parents are from because it's farmland out there. There's
sure
for a 22-year-old,
English farmland.
Yeah, when you're 22, it's not the most fun place.
Sure.
So at that point,
for me it would have been, just for the record.
Oh, yeah.
That's like that would have been super cool. But go on.
Yeah. So I left. Basically, one day at college, I had like a bad day. Where I wasn't like on time with a couple projects and things weren't going so well. So I was like, you know what, I'm just gonna spend the day and I'm just gonna apply for jobs because at this point we got like 2 weeks left of college.
What were you studying to?
Architecture.
Okay.
Yeah, so it had two weeks left and I sat there the whole day just like thinking about where I'm gonna apply, and then I applied to a couple places. And one of them was Lake Plato Architects, which is here in San Antonio. And they kind of got back to me and we had like a Skype interview, and I was actually at the store with my parents and at the time, and they sent me an email and they're like, hey, yeah, you should come in for an internship. And I was like, I got nothing else to do. Yeah. I guess I'll roll over there. So
that's awesome.
So yeah, 2 weeks. They gave me 2 weeks, and 2 weeks I was on a plane. Day of my graduation.
Nice. Who needs it anyway?
Right. It's
tassels
just a ceremony,
and caps and stuff. I wouldn't have done mine, except my mom would have been heartbroken if I hadn't gone.
I think my mom was a little heartbroken.
Yeah, probably.
Plus, I was moving, across the world.
So do you get to see them still very often, or you go back once a year?
They come out pretty often, but I haven't been back in 3 years.
Wow.
So it's been a long time. It's pretty expensive to go. It's like $1,200.
Yeah. Just build a plane, man.
Yeah, I mean, by this point, I may as well just build a plane and
transatlantic flight all to yourself.
Build a boat and just I'll be back. I'll be back in 2 months.
Yeah, that's very cool. Well, I didn't know obviously anything about that, but I weirdly noticed the name Oliver, and I was like, I don't think that's a name I hear a lot.
Oh yeah,
as an American name.
That's a British name for sure.
Yeah. Okay. So then, and I should also probably mention to the listeners that they can hear the birds and maybe a little bit of wind because we just opened up the shop and just enjoying a really nice, lovely day. And I'll post pictures, obviously, so y'all can see it on my Instagram. But what then led you to starting your own shop? Because I think that that's a decision, and it's one I'm familiar with. It takes some thought.
Right.
It's risky. It's difficult. And it takes a certain type of person to make it work. And you guys have been in business for, you told me, over 2 years now?
Yeah, just over 2 years.
Just over 2 years. So what led you to wanting to do that on your own?
I always had like a pipe dream of doing it just from working in metal shops. I was always like, man, it would be cool to own a shop one day.
Yeah.
And one of the main reasons I would have liked to own a shop is just to have somewhere where I could build my own things and have a place to kind of escape. But the process of that happened pretty naturally. I was actually living in California at the time. I was out there for a year, and I wasn't enjoying the work that I was doing. I was working. It was a pretty crazy experience. I was working in right on the beach. It was beautiful. Working on a beach house.
How awful.
Yeah,
I'm waiting for the bad.
Well, the bad part was what I came to realize was you can be in such a beautiful place and right by the ocean, but if you don't have friends or family near you, it's nothing.
Did you hear that, podcast listeners? Because he just
I just
elucidated the
moved.
point of life, I think.
Yeah, but I had a lot of friends here in San
Yeah.
Antonio, so that's what brought me back to San Antonio. Was just to be closer to friends and honestly, that's really one of the main reasons the company has grown so quick is through connections of friends and the community here in San Antonio is so it's awesome.
So I've seen some of the products you've been working on lately. Obviously, I scrubbed your Instagram a little bit and did my best. Also seemed like you used to have an Instagram and then just said, screw it, you're just going to do the business one.
Yeah,
'Cause I found
if you
some
scroll
pictures where
far,
you
far
were-
down enough, it's
He was the anonymous Instagrammer that Instagram calls you, and you're still tagged in pictures, but it doesn't exist anymore. The account's gone.
right.
So now it's Citizen Build.
Yeah, I can't remember what I had it called before. It was,
You guys are. What I thought was really cool too is you have this whole brand that you're building. Like it's not just about the gigs that you're doing, but it's also like buy the T-shirts and the hats and stuff with some really cool
Right.
design work on them.
Well, that's something that's super important to me. The job I was doing in California was very corporate, and that was one thing I didn't like about it. I understand why, it was a large company, so it had to be corporate. Otherwise, it probably wouldn't have stayed in business. But that was one of the main things that I wanted to create with this was to get away from all of that and all the employees that I have right now are friends. That works out really well as long as you kind of set boundaries at the start.
Right.
And then as soon as you do that, it's like, yeah, let's go. Let's make this happen. And it makes for a really great work environment.
I couldn't agree more. We have a lot of
Yeah.
really good friends working at Marketing T, and it's just the best to be able to work with people that you know.
Yeah.
First, I think it comes down to trust too. 'Cause
Yeah,
I've had those bad
exactly.
business moments where it's like someone not only made a mistake, but then also did their best to screw me over.
Right.
And at least with a friend, the second part might not happen.
Yeah, and I've definitely had that experience too, where it's like you have someone, but it's like you haven't known them, so it's hard to be able to like trust them with your business.
Right.
Whereas and yeah, like trust is super important for me too. You're giving them your like credit card to go buy stuff.
Right.
They're managing your time and your projects. So
They have access to all your clients.
yeah, exactly.
That's a big one.
So it really does help, and it relieves a lot of pressure for sure. And plus, like I was telling one of the guys this yesterday, actually, it's really rewarding to kind of take a step back and be like, man, like I've created this environment that one of my friends can come here and make money for his family and work and kind of get away from everything and just be here, and that wouldn't have happened if it wasn't for this whole thing. So
Right.
so I'm super appreciative of those guys. You know, I started the company, but without them, it wouldn't be where it's at right now. They're super important for sure.
So, starting up the business, one thing to be a craftsman and a technician, and it's a totally another thing to handle sales and branding and getting clients and making deals and writing contracts. And
Right.
I found myself drawn to that part of it. For me, my favorite part of being in business, I love marketing and I like to think I'm a quite good marketer and have good advice, but I really leave the marketing to a great team of people behind me. And what I get to focus on then is building a really solid strategy for a client and like handling all the sales, making the phone calls, making the videos, you know, that's been big for me. But I think sometimes it's a little tricky to do both for people. And I imagine you were a really solid technician, but were you new to kind of the sales piece of that or the
Oh
business
man,
building piece of it?
I knew nothing
Yeah.
about owning a business. I kind of got thrown into it. When I started the business, I only got an LLC because I thought that I needed one as far as like liability goes.
Right.
So I was like, well, I'll just open it, and it's $300. You know, I'll just go down there and do it. And I got really lucky with this first project that kind of got thrown in my lap. I don't know if you might have saw them if you scrolled far enough down on there on the Instagram, but there are these horizontally pivoted doors on a pool house. So I got extremely lucky on that project because it was one of the principals at Lake Flato Architects who I'd known from when I worked there. And he needed these doors for his pool house. So I bid the project. And this is when I had minus $500 in my bank account.
Sure. Yep.
So I bid the project, and he gave me a deposit, and I kind of rolled with it. And he was trusting enough to trust me with a project, and that speaks volumes because a lot of people want to see like, oh, have you done this before? And you might have done it before working for someone else, but have you done it on your own before?
Right.
It's definitely a question. So that was really a foot in the door project, and he even let me live at his pool house for 3 months while I was doing the project. But anyway, at that point I didn't know that I was going to start the company. I was just like, hey, this is way better than what I was doing before.
Right.
Like, I'm going to ride this until the wheels fall off.
Yep.
And that lasted 3 months, and then it ended, and I was like, oh man, that was awesome. Like, how can I keep this going? And then I got a railing project, and then I was like, okay, I got 2 weeks of railing project. Like, I do that. And then I got slow, and then I had a couple months off, and then I got another project. And then after I got that other project, it just snowballed.
Yeah.
And then, here I am. And I'm like, hey, I guess this is a company now.
Well, I feel like part of starting the new business is just like, can you hold out? Can you
Right.
keep going and give it enough time that people in the industry can pass your name around? Can you do enough projects? Can you
Right.
take nice pictures of them and show people like, I do good work, I'm an honest person, and it will start to snowball as long as you can wait for it.
Right.
Everybody can wait for it, but you have
Yeah,
to.
it definitely takes a lot of patience for sure.
Yeah. But I think that the people who find your startup first are the ones who benefit the most because they're going to get your most passionate work at the cheapest you will ever do it.
Oh yeah, that
You know?
first project we did, we didn't. I'm pretty sure I paid them to do it.
Yeah, nearly.
because I mean, it wasn't like they were getting necessarily a great deal. It was just because when I first started out, I didn't even own a welding machine. So when I first started, I was like, well, the first thing I have to do is buy a welder, buy some tools, and that was the profit was the tools and the but then that set me up to do the other work, and it really kind of snowballed after that. And then but yeah, it's full of road humps, and it can be a challenge, but the payoff is pretty rewarding.
Yeah.
It's definitely way more rewarding than not doing it.
Yeah, I mean, Well, it just comes down to what you're about, what you're into. And some people really love security, and I get that. And some people love freedom, and I'm the type that loves freedom and
Right.
tries to find it in every form that I can.
Yeah, and that's literally like I was saying before about the corporate job I had before. The big thing for me wasn't like, oh, I'm going to lose money. It's like I was living at the job site. We had rules that we had to go by, even just when we were off work. So it was very like, you can't do this, you can't do this, you can't do this is what you need to do this, you know.
What kind of rules?
Yeah, so
can
when
they tell you not to do in your off time?
right, like you can't come back late because you know everyone's gonna wake up or like. So it was pretty freeing when I started the company, and that was what I was chasing. Like I was like, I want to do this for as long as possible because no one can, within reason, no one can tell me like, hey, you can't not leave your shoes at the door or like,
Yeah.
you know, something like that. But, you know, on the other end of that, you have to, when you get employees, then you're the one who has to say like, hey, we have to do this way, or we have to, but that's when it comes, when it's people, when you have people, that work with you that you respect and they respect you, then there's never a disagreement. You know, it's always, I always tell the guys, like, I never want to be in a situation where your input is not valued. Like, if ever I'm doing anything, then you're like, it's not, there's a better way, like, always say something.
Right.
And
This is my favorite. I'm
I'm
obsessed with this concept right now too, because I just finished like Malcolm Gladwell Outliers and stuff. I don't know if you ever read it, but he talks about the examples of like pilots from different countries and how their co-pilot can either tell them like, hey man, you're doing something wrong, or if the level of respect between a pilot and co-pilot is like way off the charts where the co-pilot can't correct the pilot on anything.
Right.
And that's what they find is there's all these situations where planes crash because a co-pilot can't tell a pilot they're doing something wrong.
Yeah.
They just can't. There's too much whatever is built into the system in that way.
Yeah, it's super, yeah.
All the way to like I know I'm gonna die in a plane crash, and I can't tell this dude next to me like, hey man, screw you, you're doing this wrong, and we're
Right.
about to die. It's just so deeply
Yeah,
ingrained.
that's mind-blowing.
Yeah, it really was. If
Yeah.
I didn't, and I know it's funny as I didn't particularly like the book, but I loved that section of it because I was like,
Right.
wow, like, and the same thing that happens in like operating rooms. I don't know if you've heard about this at all, but there's this whole like other podcast called like Dr. Doom or something, and the whole project was about this one doctor who makes all these mistakes and is like an addict and has all these problems and keeps hurting people, but nothing in the system is there to catch it. Like even the nurses in the operating room can't tell you like, you need to stop operating because you're visibly impaired right now.
Right.
Like you got someone's life on the table and you're just, oh well, you
Yep.
know.
Yeah, that's, yeah, that,
In your
That-
line of work, there's like a safety component to that too, which is like
there is, yeah.
you can't be
There's-
dumb or someone's gonna get hurt.
Yeah, there's a lot of things that can happen in here if you're, and that's the thing. It's better to work slow and methodically than, you know, just slamming stuff out,
Right.
because at that point you're either gonna hurt yourself or you're gonna just end up redoing something.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, I can't even imagine being in like a doctor's situation and
Yeah.
being like, hey, by the way, I
Yeah.
don't know if you should.
Yeah.
And then they do something and it, you know, screws someone up for life. Like that's,
Of all the reasons we have to avoid surgery at all costs, that's definitely one of the scariest. It's like you're
Yeah.
asleep on the table and it's like, will anyone advocate for me if someone's doing something stupid? Like,
yeah.
Ooh, yeah.
Yeah. And that's the funny part is like people in that position. Like, I think when you're like, when I was growing up and I would see like people in that position, I'd be like, oh, there's no way like they could ever make a mistake. Like they're perfect, you know? And then you're like, when you're older, you're like, no, everyone makes mistakes, if
Right.
not more when they're adults.
Yeah. Well, and because you start to become the adult and you're like, actually, I make
Yeah.
a lot of mistakes and I do my best, but
Yeah.
it's not always perfect. I was going to ask you too, just while we're still on like the business side of things, the name, the brand, you've got a whole thing that's going on. Citizen Build.
Yeah.
What is this? What is the Citizen? Are you
Well,
a citizen?
that kind of, I actually get that a lot, but it's that kind of brings us back to that conversation we just had, where I try to think of something that was more of like a humbling name, like There's when I was in architecture school, there's a really great movie called Citizen Architect, and it's about this college in Alabama that has a program called Rural Studio, and they basically build houses for like 20 grand for people who need them.
Wow.
And I really loved that movie just because of that. You know, in architecture school, they're focusing so much on like, hey, look at this crazy building that was, you know, $500 billion.
Yeah.
But then like, hey, here's a studio that's building $20,000 houses for people who actually need them. And it was called Citizen Architect. So, I mean, that's where the kind of idea started spinning about citizen build. And I just always saw like the word citizen as like it's almost like a blue collar, like, you know, humbling name. So that's kind of, I guess that's why
You saw the word a lot as a kid too, as you had to deal with wearing
yeah, I
high
got, yeah.
citizen.
Yeah, I
That
guess
comes
dual
out.
citizenship.
Yeah. So it's
but
not,
it- but
it's
it-
not dictator build and it's not president
Right.
build or king build.
Yeah, it's like the opposite of all
Yeah.
that. It's like, you know, it's basically the idea of you know, building good work for a humble price and humble people.
It's an egalitarian type thing, and you
Yeah.
treat your team in that sense too. It seems, and there's input from everybody, and that's important, kind of in your story there.
Yeah, that kind of sums it up in a nutshell. That it's all of those things are super important.
So there's another component, kind of to the business or the brand or whatever you want to call it, which is it's not just craftsmanship and the things you guys are building, because that seems obvious to me. I can see that, but the way that you frame it is that you guys are posting some awesome photos and videos of the work that you're doing. And I mean, I see there's like some seriously artsy stuff. I know at least there's one picture I saw that's like, guy's got the welding mask on, it's flipped up, and it's like just a really intense kind of shot. So who's doing your photography for you? Is that something you do yourself?
Well, originally it was just, you know, I would just take a picture and kind of edit it a little bit and then throw it up there. But recently, I've been working with a guy called Tanner from a company here in San Antonio called Due South, and he's basically kind of rebranding the whole company, and he takes some photos too, and he takes a lot better photos than I could ever do.
They're
so.
super cool looking.
Yeah, he's really talented, and I'm lucky enough to be able to work with him. Yeah, he's kind of taking over that whole like branding image of the company. And one of the main aspects that we're working on is like creating a brand that shows this kind of like brotherhood within the company. And that also touches base on like, like working like a corporate job where like there'll be like one person and they get all the credit, and like I would never want to have that happen here. It's always like I said before, like the guys in the shop have really kind of pushed the company to the next level that I could never have done if it was just me on my own. So they also deserve just as much credit as I do. So that's why we're kind of putting that out there, like, hey, these are the guys too. Like, these guys operate the same way. So.
Yeah, I have done somewhat the opposite with my business, with Marketing Tea. Only so like I guess I'm like the figurehead of that business. I do my best to share credit every time we actually do a project. So nothing a client's like, oh, great job with that, and I'm like, thank you. I worked very hard on it. It's not like that at all.
Yeah.
But I mostly do it because my team's all totally remote. And so instead of making them take photos themselves working or make videos for the company or things like that, I'm like, you guys just do your work and I'll handle the other part of it. But I do kind of like that you have that vibe about it. And I also, I mean, it's an artistic endeavor in a lot of ways.
Well, that's the thing. Like, those guys have they have their hands on it. Like,
yeah.
for me to like take that and be like, yeah, I built this, like that would be pretty messed up. So.
I actually didn't know if I had seen a photo of you on your Instagram when we met up. I thought you were one dude, and then I think that wasn't actually you.
That might have been Alan. I post a lot of pictures of him. Just
Whoever it
I'm
is that has the hat on, and the mustache.
That's Alan.
Okay.
He's awesome. He's definitely a good asset to the
That's
team.
my favorite thing too, is when I show up and I'm meeting up with somebody and I'm just like, all right, let me just try to see the vibe. I'm looking for someone who's sitting alone. And then in your case, obviously, I was looking for like a hipster vibe. So you show up, you've got the beanie and the long hair and the flannel and the tattoos, and I was like, yeah, that's the dude. That's got to be him.
Yeah, that's him.
Do you get accused of that a lot, just being a hipster because I feel like it's a big thing in Texas, especially sort of in the world of the craftsman.
I've never.
Am I the first one to? Is it an insult to call you hipster?
I don't think so.
Just means you're out here doing something different and new, but somewhat kind of embracing like an old school approach and working with your hands.
Right.
Instead of guys like me who are working on the internet.
Yeah, I mean, no, I guess I haven't really had that too much, but I feel like when I'm working, I'm more just in a hoodie and just boots, and on the weekends I put a flannel on.
So, well, I did kind of want to round out. So I love talking about Citizen Build and the metalworking. Obviously, that's super cool. But I also kind of want to know kind of the other things that you're into, because this is not a one-dimensional podcast. I really don't want it to be, at least. The excuse of meeting someone is like, oh, you do this thing, and that's a good thing for us to talk about. But like, I just like to hear someone's story and kind of what they're about. So obviously, we've talked a lot about motorcycles too, and I'll have to snap some pictures of the ones you're working on to go out with the episode. But definitely into motorcycles, working on the old chopper custom Harleys, which is super cool. The metalworking comes in handy.
Yeah, it comes hand in hand for sure. Apart from when it's working on the motor, which I have no idea about.
Yeah, that stuff is complex for sure.
Yeah,
it still intimidates me less than bending a piece of metal.
It's super intimidating. It's luckily I have. I mean, even Alan, the guy with the mustache and the hat.
The guy I thought I was meeting. But I was just like guessing. I was like, I wonder who I'm actually talking to.
Yeah, he works on motorcycles, and he's really, really talented. And he's actually one of the guys who can work on a motor, fabricate stuff, and paint. Like, he can do everything.
That's super cool.
And he does ceramics too. He's like all around, like he's the dude. But yeah, working on motors intimidates me for sure. But the metalworking side of it is definitely more up my alley. It's just finding the time.
Yeah. Well, there's so many different aspects of it too. Like, you're working with a frame, but you can do any of the work you need on a frame, but then you have to powder coat too in most cases, and typically it's like a different person. Do you guys powder coat here at all, or do you have
we don't powder coat, but we just built a spray booth right there.
Oh, I see that.
Yeah. But we can only paint in there. We can't powder coat, but we've been talking about maybe painting some tanks in there.
That's cool.
Yeah.
Oh, that'd be awesome.
Yeah, it's the perfect setup for that.
Right.
It's 12 by 12.
And what we're talking about is painting gas tanks for you non-motorcycle people out there. I don't think any non-motorcycle people listen to this show. You got to be into bikes. It's a prerequisite.
To subscribe.
To subscribe, you must like motorcycles. But okay, so I got motorcycles, and you have a girlfriend who you seem into, who is cleaning today and doesn't get to come hang out with us.
Yeah, she's kind of used this Sunday to unwind. So I figured I'd give her that.
San Antonio local?
No, she's from Long Beach in California.
Did you guys meet out there and like move out here?
No, we met out here.
Whoa.
But yeah, we live over there in Highland Park, which is a pretty nice neighborhood of San Antonio. And it's cool because we have a lot of friends in that neighborhood, and it's a pretty small neighborhood, so it's kind of nice to be able to be so close to so many people. I mean, that kind of touches on me being back in California and not knowing anyone.
Right.
And then now we're living in San Antonio and have people, 2 blocks away.
And you mentioned having this realization out in California of like, oh, friends and family, like that's where it's at.
Right.
Find that community, which is what brought you back here. Did you just happen to come to that yourself? I mean, I'm curious because you mentioned things like meditating, and you got pretty stoked when I was talking about isolation tanks and stuff. So are you Do you do any of that kind of stuff, like on the mindfulness?
If I'm having
thinking?
like a day where I have a lot going on, like I'll take like 5 minutes just to sit in the truck and just kind of zone out for 5 minutes. But I used to ride BMX, and that right there was, growing up, that was like my therapy.
Right.
Because you can't really think about anything else other than that when you're doing that.
You can. You just crash.
Yeah,
You know,
unless you,
pick.
yeah. But and honestly, I mean, motorcycles is the same way. Like you're kind of in the moment, and then when I was in California, I kind of picked up surfing a little bit, and that kind of replaced BMX for a little bit, just because it's the same concept. Like it's whatever you can do to get in the moment and not have to think about anything else but right then and there.
It's one of my favorite books of all time is Zen and the Art of Motorcycle Maintenance.
Oh, I've heard of that book.
Oh, you gotta read it too. Yeah, especially because of his approach to like just mechanics and machining and
yeah, it
things.
touches on that too, right?
It does, yeah, because he was the dude's crazy. Robert Pirsig, who wrote the book. I mean, actually crazy. Like, first of all, his IQ was like 170 or something. And he was just a super genius, and then majored in like 7 different things at 7 different universities or whatever. Totally snapped at one point and was like locked up in an asylum straight up, and then sort of just decided he would like play by the rules again. And then they also like they zapped his brain and literally like made him forget everything he had ever done, and then he was like,
oh wow,
he just like moved on. Yeah, it's a nutty story. Anyway, that's totally not the point, but I'm just obsessed with Robert Pirsig. But it's that concept of motorcycles is one way. Obviously, that's a play on the original, which was like Zen and the Art of Archery, which was like an ancient Japanese thing, where the whole idea is like if you have a task that requires your full concentration, or you can at least put your full concentration into it, then you can kind of zone out everything else.
Yeah, that's meditation right there.
It is.
Yeah,
and that's what motorcycles are, because if you're not paying attention to where you're going.
Oh yeah.
I mean, it happened today. I was riding out to Michio for tacos. Literally right before I was there, I had someone cut me off, and I about skidded down the road. Like it was a bad moment. I wasn't thinking about anything else.
Right. Yeah, you're in the moment at that point.
That's not the most fun way to do it. Mostly just like riding down the road is more pleasant.
That's not something you'd want to happen.
But we're just like, we're so constantly distracted. And there's always 20 things to be thinking about in any moment. That's one of the things I like about podcasting too, and that's why I wear the sound canceling headphones and make the guest wear them too, is because somehow now we're linked up in this conversation. There's nothing that can really pull our focus hugely away from that moment. I've even like, there was some joke about like Zen and the Art of dishwashing. Like if you just can turn everything in your day into like, I am doing this task right now.
Right. Being
Totally there. That's Zen.
That's pretty much what it's all about.
Right. That was cool. I had never thought about it with welding. Mostly because it used to stress me out so much. But I guess if you get good at it.
I mean, even when you kind of have it down, you don't really have it down.
Uh-huh.
Like you still have to like concentrate, especially with TIG welding.
What's the difference in TIG? I've only done MIG welding.
So MIG welding is like a wire feed.
Yeah, the wire comes out of the, what do you call it?
The spool gun.
Yeah.
So that's the really cool thing about welding is like you can either, pick it up as like a hobby, and you can build some stuff. Like you can practice for a week and get some stuff down, and you can build like a table and all that kind of stuff.
With MIG welding, you've got the gun in the hand, and then you have the other end of the metal is ground to something.
Yeah.
What's happening is if correct me as I'm wrong here, but I think what I remember was that like it's spooling out a really thin piece of metal, and it's running an electric current through it, and so literally an electron jumps from that piece of metal onto the metal that you're welding, and that binds them electrically.
Yeah, that's pretty much the concept. It's a circuit.
Yeah.
But so MIG welding is, the spool, and that's very accessible to start. There's stick welding, which is your rod is the electrode, and that's usually made for out in the oil field, kind of pipe fitting and structural welding. So the two main weldings we use here are MIG and TIG, and TIG's like the drumming of welding, because you have a foot pedal which controls your amps.
Whoa.
Yeah, so
determine how fast you go, basically, or like a sewing machine.
In
almost?
turn, yeah. So like if you're you want to be at the right amps for the right material that you're using, and also you want to be at the so you have a torch in one hand and a wire in the other, and basically you're manually it's the most manual way of welding. Like you're literally controlling the amps with your foot. So in turn, you have to I can't think of the word, but you have to kind of train yourself to coincide your foot with the speed that you're moving at, and also in your right hand or your left hand, however you're doing it, you're dabbing at a certain tempo, and that's where the tempo comes in. Because all of that in turn, it's literally like drumming or any kind of musical instrument. Like it's all muscle memory. It's a steady hand. It's being in the right position. There's so much to it. Like dialing your machine in. There's a lot to TIG welding. So
what's the reason between the two that we do one or the other?
It's all, honestly, it's kind of somewhat comes down to practicality, and then somewhat comes down to personal preference. TIG welding, in my opinion, is way more detail orientated. You can kind of manipulate where the heat is distributed, and I think it's definitely a cleaner looking weld. So for stuff where like it's got to be like perfect, we usually TIG
if
weld
it's like going to be a visual maybe, or
if it's gonna be
seen somehow.
if it's gonna be a visual thing, and the weld's not gonna be like ground down or
right.
And a lot of the times, like if you have everything clamped up and you're gonna MIG weld it, you don't arc until your wire hits the material. So you could be all clamped up, but I guess if the wire hit the material, it could move a little bit if you're not clamped properly. Whereas TIG, you start by like fusing everything, and that's the current like jumps from your torch to the table. So you don't even touch anything. It's very like detail. That's how they weld like bicycle frames up with, and the heat distribution is, yeah, like I said, it's a lot more accurate. MIG, you're kind of just like blowing through.
Yeah.
But MIG is there's definitely like a big science to that too.
So was this did you learn all this via your architectural studies then? You had like some shop time and...
We had shop time.
And then obviously
I
you learned
took
it as a kid a bit.
Yeah, so I learned the basics from my dad. Just from, he'd be in the garage and, it'd be cold and I'd be like, I'm not going in there. But in the summertime, it would be fine.
Yeah.
But yeah, took classes, and the only class I never took was stick. But we don't do much stick welding. It's usually MIG and TIG.
My mind's a little blown.
Yeah, it takes a while. But and the crazy thing about it is like the welding is only like 10% of the stuff that we do here.
What's the other 90%?
The other
planning is probably...
Yeah, I would say like the other 90% is literally like processing material and cutting and then finishing and blending, and there's a lot that goes into it apart from the welding part. Is just you got your parts, now you're putting them together. That definitely takes skill, but the fabrication part takes just as much skill as the welding part. So it's a whole it's a whole thing. Like,
yeah.
And that's what kind of makes it cool. You're building things, and it's not just one process. It's you're cutting and you're grinding and you're blending and you're painting and you're doing all kinds of things. And a couple of the guys I have come from like carpentry backgrounds, and there's a lot of transferable skills within that. Like just an attention, like Alan and a guy called Jake, they both have like extremely high level of detail, which they've got from, being carpenters, which also transfers over here. And then, cutting and everything. I mean, as far as like cutting, the only real difference is just knowing how the saw works and like how the material moves as opposed to wood. But once you have that down, it's a similar process.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it all kind of transfers. But yeah, it was
Well, I was just thinking about like how far we have all gotten from the art of fabricating our own things. You know, like it's become so specialized that I'm sure there was a time where if I was asking these questions about welding, like half the country would know how to weld, and it'd be like, what do you?
Right.
This is what I do every day. You know, someone like me couldn't have my mind blown by how it works. But we get so specialized, and there's such a barrier to entry now because it's such a you either have to do it full time or not, almost.
Right.
Like it's a commitment,
right.
in so many ways. But I'm always just interested in it because obviously part of life on the road is like, I can't own a welder. Like that's not going to happen.
Oh yeah. Yeah, they're kind of big and clunky.
Yeah, they're pretty clunky. Not that I'd be able to make much use of it anyways. Like,
Yeah.
when would I whip that out? Like once a year to fix a tiny thing.
I guess you could do stuff on your motorcycle. Like,
Yeah.
but yeah, it's,
If I keep it shiny side up, I won't have to
Yeah.
if I try. It doesn't always work like that though, does it?
No.
Well, that's the thing that scares me about the old custom builds too, is that they're just a little more unreliable, more likely something's going to break down on you.
Oh yeah.
Or like, you know,
And especially if you're like me, where you don't have much experience in the motor side of things, you'll just be riding along and it'll cut out, and you'll be like, oh,
yeah.
I better call my friend Zeke.
Well,
or
cut
some-
out if you're lucky. Or if you're not lucky, your chain wraps around and all of a sudden your back wheel locks, or, you know,
Right.
there's just so many rough things that can happen as you're going 70 miles an hour. That's the thing that always torments me. I try to ride and not think about that. But luckily
Yeah.
I'm on a more modern machine that doesn't do that quite as often as
Yeah,
as they
that's
used to.
that's the nice thing. That goes through my mind as well. so.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, if you're cognizant of what you're doing, it can't not, because you're like, what would happen if I just flew off?
Oh
the
yeah,
front
if
of
you
this
go
thing?
down that rabbit hole, then you
Yeah.
should just pull over and take
You
a
may not
breather.
even ride at that point. Yeah, well, and after an accident, and so I had a pretty solid accident, and the best advice I read was like, you need to get back on your bike as soon as possible, because otherwise it's all going to soak in your head, and the fear is just going to start to build up, and you need to go back out and get rid of that fear and make it normal again, and learn
Yeah.
what you did wrong and try to do it better again.
Yeah, it's like when I rode BMX, it was the same thing. Like
Right.
you'd ride and it would be, the best thing ever, and then all of a sudden, like, just like a motorcycle accident, you're on the floor and you're like, why do I do
Right.
this? Like, why am I doing this right now?
Right.
And then you recover, and then you're like, hey, let's do it again.
Right. Yeah, it's the same thing with like with any type of sports injury too, really.
Yeah.
Like you get that injury and you're like, either I can sit here and I'll be plagued by fear and I'm not going to go do it again,
Yeah.
because it'll just build the longer you wait, or you go right back into the deep end.
Yep. And then you get that feeling again. You're like, oh, I'm right back in the seat.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I do think about that probably too much, just because I'm like a safety guy, because I love my motorcycle, but I don't intend to die on it. Like
Right.
that's not my goal. Some people, I think that is the goal.
Oh
I
man.
see the way some people ride.
Yeah, I mean, here in Texas is no helmet law, so you'll see. I mean, I've literally seen a guy going. He must have been going like 80 or 90 on the freeway in sandals,
Oh yeah, flip
board
flops.
shorts, and no helmet. And I'm like, oh man, it's not worth it.
They call them squids, and I can't remember what squid stands for, but it's like something about like stupid riders who are probably going to die or something like that.
Yeah, definitely not one of those kind of guys.
Don't ride like that, people. Good Lord. There's just, well, that's just like anything else. It's like some things you do to enrich. What is that? That's a quote. I'm stealing a quote from like The Italian Job or something, even though I haven't seen that movie in years. You know what it is? I realized why I was thinking about The Italian Job, and I think it's because you look a little bit like Edward Norton.
Oh, I don't know. I haven't ever seen the Italian Job. So
Have you seen like Fight Club or
I've seen Fight Club, but man, I can't picture Edward Norton.
the main dude? Obviously
He's not the
Brad
guy
Pitt.
from Scrubs, right? I get that one a lot.
Zach Braff? No.
I can't remember his name. He's got like dark hair.
No.
He's got like,
This is important. Well, it's just funny because that's exactly what I started thinking of, was like, why am I thinking of The Italian Job? Anyway, the point was I was thinking there's some line where like Donald Sutherland says like some people do things to enrich their lives and some people do it to define their lives. And I feel like that's so true of anything that you're going to enjoy and get into. It's just the same with motorcycles. It's like, that is to enrich my life, not to define it, which means if I go down and I'm dead on my motorcycle, then I kind of missed the point, because
Right.
it was to enrich, not to be a thing I do. Well, all these pictures are not like, this is like modern Edward Norton, because you don't look like 50-year-old Edward Norton. Anyway.
Yeah, that's a good point though. There's definitely like it's like those like chopper guys who don't run any front brakes and no helmet
See,
or whatever.
you told me about this, and I can't even believe that's a thing.
But it's like, I guess that's kind of what makes it kind of rad, like the risk is just so big that like that's kind of cool, But then again, it's not. I don't know if I personally could ever do that, but definitely respect all that side of things.
There you go. There's my. Well, I don't know if that's the best picture.
Oh, this guy.
Can you picture him now?
Yeah, I've never, no one's ever said this before. He's like a clean cut version.
Yeah.
If I was to like get a
He had a
haircut and get a shave, and, which is never.
It's just so funny because I'll be talking with someone, and I'm like, there's a movie that's popping in my head, and I can all of a sudden pull quotes about it out of nowhere, and then I'm like, oh no, yeah, that's why.
Yeah.
Anyway, that's the idea of the podcast. I just get to say whatever I want to say. No
Yeah.
one can tell me no.
Yeah.
I only try to say nice things, but. Okay. Motorcycles, community, family, your tribe, your people around here in San Antonio, metalworking.
Yeah, I mean
the UK.
that's pretty much. And Carnitas. That's pretty much it.
What was the place we went to?
Carnitas Longha.
Yeah.
That's definitely a hidden gem here in San Antonio.
Maybe we shouldn't tell people about it. Don't worry, not that many.
Yeah, we'll
people
cut
hear
that part out.
Yeah, those were some really good carnitas.
Yeah.
Some
And what's good
leftovers
about
for
that
Andrew.
place is they have that the fish taco stand too.
Yeah.
Which is just as good.
Yeah.
So you can go there and you can be like, I'm super hungry, I just want carnitas.
Right.
Or you can be like, I want something on the lighter side.
This happened one other time where I was hanging out with it was the first episode ever of the podcast, and it was Daniel Poe, and we were hanging out in Tyler, Texas, and I was walking around town with the mayor, and he just knew everybody, and everybody was giving him free stuff and giving me free stuff. And it was the same thing with you, because we pulled up and this dude walks over with ceviche and shrimp and stuff and just sets it down. I'm like, oh no, that we didn't order that. And then you're like, oh no, that's my friend. And then like 3 other people said, see you later while we were there.
Yeah, that's the fish taco. Yeah, he kind of hooked it up there.
So you found your community here, or built one in San Antonio.
Yeah,
in a big way.
I guess it really all started, 9 years ago when I first got here. And that's what initially brought me back, is like all the friends I'd made in that first year here. That was like no other. I mean, I lived in Austin for 4 years, and I definitely felt more at home in San Antonio. So that's initially why I moved back. And then as soon as I moved back and started just being around, I started meeting more and more people. And the community here is so small and kind of everyone's close. So it made for a really great environment to like meet all these awesome people. And that's how I've met, Alan and Jake and the guys who work here too. Right.
So it seems like that thing you were looking for. Do you think you've found it out here, or you've built it?
Yeah. I mean, when I first moved here, it was such a contrast to where I was at that, I mean, I haven't really thought about that question before, but now you brought it up. It's mind blowing. If I could have told myself this was, and it really isn't anything to do with the company. It's more just like, man, like the spot, there's so many people here that are good people and friends of mine that's what's made San Antonio so great.
In the weather.
Yeah.
The weather's pretty awesome here.
The weather is great in the wintertime, and then summer rolls around, and I like the heat and the humidity, but welding shop, it doesn't work out too well.
Right. Yeah, I mean, it's leap year, so yesterday on February 29, I was like outside. Andrew and I both got sunburned outside, and I was like, it's February.
Yeah.
I'm sitting outside without a shirt on. It's gorgeous.
Yeah, it's 70 degrees, sunny. There's no wind.
Yeah.
That's February. Well, March 1st.
I don't know if I'll ever be north again. We spent the whole winter just doing the whole Southwest and staying in like Arizona, New Mexico, just as far south as we could possibly be over there, and then coming back to Texas, now San Antonio, so we're staying south.
Yeah.
And I just don't. I've never been drawn to winter. I've never enjoyed it. You get real tired of it. I
Yeah,
get
your
all
bones
like
get
depressed.
cold.
Is it? You're like, when am I going to see the sun again? Like,
Yeah. Here it'll be like that for like a week, and then it's just back to this,
Right.
and then another cold front will come through, and hopefully that was the one that came through last time. Hopefully that's the last.
What's
cold
a
front.
cold front? What do you call a cold front? Like 40 degrees?
Starting it actually yesterday I think was started out at 40,
Yeah.
which in some places I guess they'd be like that's t-shirt weather.
Yeah, but you're a British boy, so that's not so bad.
Yeah, but that's the thing, because that's probably why I hate it so much, because I had it for so long, and then it's like 70 degrees is way better than
Right.
40 degrees.
That's how I feel too.
Yeah.
I think that's almost really cool when you can get raised somewhere where you're like, there's something I don't like about this environment. And like for me, that was like Central Illinois. We gets pretty cold,
Yeah,
and
you
then
get
in
a lot of
Denver for a
snow.
few years it gets pretty cold. And now it's like I get to choose, and
Yeah. Hey, you get to
I
choose
don't
wherever
that
you want to
anymore.
live. Yeah.
Yeah, but I think people who it's like anybody who's native to a certain place too, like doesn't understand how good kind of they have it. And I feel like that's for me
yeah.
that's the point of like being able to move around. And I know you don't have to do it as much as I do it, but like even just being able to choose where you want to end up, that's why it kind of blows my mind when people spend their whole lives in their hometown.
Yeah.
Because it's like, did you try other places? Because there's some really cool stuff out there.
Yeah.
And like even in Colorado, it's like a big thing. People have like license plates and stickers, and well, I don't know if it's license plate, but it's definitely like bumper stickers and things that say like native.
Oh,
And it's
yeah.
like, oh yeah,
That's a
I'm
thing
from
here, too.
Colorado. Yeah, right. I just don't get that, because it's
Yeah.
like, if I see that sticker, there's a 90% chance you don't appreciate how gorgeous the Rocky Mountains are as much as I do, because you've seen them every single day, and I just saw them for the first time in my life. So we have our
Yeah,
expectations
when
are
you
way
when you
different.
grew up looking at those mountains, I guess
They just lose their luster somehow.
Yeah, I actually went to Hawaii maybe 5 years ago, and I met these two brothers, and they were like, "Yeah, we grew up here in Kona," and I took like a second to think, and I'm like, looking at them, I'm like, man, you guys grew up in Hawaii, like
Yeah.
that's insane.
Yeah. And they probably have no idea too.
Yeah, they're just like whatever.
They
It's
could
just
be
the
lovely
beach.
people. Yeah, absolutely. And that's their opinion and all, but it's like, hey man, you don't really know what the rest of us think of beaches.
Yeah, if they had gone to some places, they would be like, man, this sucks.
Yeah.
But
You just in the right place.
yeah, San Antonio is a good place to kind of end up.
Yeah. That's why there's this whole debate about like people have kids and it's like they give them like the absolute best life possible as kids. And it's like, why do those people grow up and they're like pretty unhappy?
Yeah.
It's like you almost need a little bit in your childhood that's a
Oh,
little
yeah.
screwed up.
Yeah, if I had kids, I'd tell them all the time, I'd be like, you're so lucky to live here.
Right. But it still wouldn't make that difference.
They'd be like, whatever.
Yeah, exactly. You'd have to introduce hardship in some way.
Yeah.
It's all too easy right now in so many ways. There's so much access to everything.
Yeah.
I mean, and you and I are in the last generation that can remember a time before cell phones, and after us, the next generation doesn't remember that. And I'm not harping on that as like a terrible thing, but it's like, yeah, no, yet I do remember what it was like to go and ring my neighbor's doorbell and like is Timmy
Yeah.
home to play? Like
Yeah, I was
we're
actually
outside all day, no video games.
I was talking about this with one of my friends. I can't remember, but I remember like we were both saying like we remember like when your parents gave you a cell phone, like you didn't want to have that, because that when you went out to like hang out with your friends, like that was their connection to you to come home.
Exactly.
Like,
It was
you
like your
didn't
parents'
want a cell
leash.
phone. You're like, no, I don't want to bring that thing. Like it you know,
Yeah.
the battery died. Like, but
Yeah.
now it's like they want to have that, which is
Right.
kind of crazy.
Yeah, I remember too paying for texts and texting this girl I liked. And my parents were like, "All right, you're gonna pay for the bill on that," and I was like, "Okay, fine. How much could it be?" And I ended up having to pay like $80. Like as a
Oh, yeah.
kid, it was like all the money I had, and I was like, I guess
Yeah.
it was worth texting that girl.
Yeah. Yeah, you should hit her up again and be like, hey, you owe me $80.
We're still good friends.
you-
She's a good buddy.
You owe me $40. We'll split it down the middle.
Yeah. Buy me some food at some point or something, because you have no idea how much I spent on you.
$80 in
Didn't
texting.
work out.
That's because what is like 10 cents a text?
Yeah, it was.
It's a lot of text.
It was a lot of texts. Yeah, but I was always girl crazy.
Yeah.
I've never not been girl crazy. I'm still girl crazy, and Andrea has to deal with that. Because I just need attention from women. She just has to go with that, I guess. And she has to give me all the attention.
Just gotta take your cell phone off you.
Yeah. What's that like? I'm still texting other girls. That'd be a little shady.
Yeah, that would be weird.
No, yeah, and that bill, it wouldn't be the same though. Now it's all unlimited. I could get away with it for free.
Yeah,
What was I
unlimited
worried
texting now, unlimited calls.
Yeah. What a world, man.
Yeah.
Well, that was a weird direction, but it is funny to think about because, and I think that in the same way that lends itself to me, it lends itself to a generation of people who, like you and I, have this fortitude to start a business and be able to do something classic like working with your hands and building something, and also being able to work with the technology and put it on your side. And I'm not saying that like the entrepreneurial spirit will not be there for the next generation, but it's going to look entirely different.
Right.
Because to me, it'll be all online. There's just not the same. I don't know if many kids could put on a welding hood and stay in the moment like that.
We get that a lot, like showing up to a job site and like, man, you guys are younger.
Yeah.
Like, 'cause this, especially welding, like there's a lot of like older guys that are welders, but I think back when they were starting out, there was probably a lot more welders or like carpenters than there are now, like welders and carpenters.
There's demand for it.
Yeah.
Because we're building just as many things we always have built, probably more. Yeah. But from what I understand now too, it's like it's a really solid option for someone who wants to be like, I don't need to go into massive amounts of debt and go to a 4-year school and whatever. Like, let me go to technical school, and it's not nearly as expensive to do that. And now all of a sudden I have a life skill and a pension and
and it's kind of morbid, but the really cool thing too is like you're hand building things and they're going to be there forever.
Right.
So you're kind of going to be there like indefinitely. Like your story has been there. If like someone else could have built that door or whatever, but they wouldn't have built it that same way in those details. So like you having your hands on that, and that's what I always thought was cool about my granddad. Like he was a carpenter and worked on ships, and all that work that he did is still there, you know. Like it's cool, but like I guess if you're in like an Excel spreadsheet, that's not going to be there. Well, I guess it could be there forever.
Yeah, it's so tricky to say too, because I see that, but at the same time, most of my work involves making like video and photo content for clients, and it's the same. I feel the same way about it, where it's like no one else was going to get that shot the way I got it, and no one else was going to do what my editor did to pull those two things together, and the music's at that moment. And so like I'm lucky enough to still have that version of creating, but then there are a ton of jobs where it's just pure
it's like you know, punching in
data entry type stuff where it's like where was the impact of that, where was the creation with that. I think that is a really cool thing. You're making me think now of like architecture school, like Fountainhead type stuff. You ever read that book? I got a lot of books for you today. I'm just full of references today. Some days I am, and some days I'm just like empty. Like there's so many episodes of podcasts where it's like, oh, I had something interesting, I thought about that, and I just didn't say it. But no, that's another book for your list if you like thinking about.
Yeah, I want to check out that motorcycle one too, for sure.
Oh yeah.
Sounds like a solid book.
I could talk about his life forever. He's so crazy. Robert Persick is nuts. And he wrote a second book called Lila, which he's living on a sailboat, and it's all about like the boat instead of the motorcycle thing, and it's like a totally different type in his life. But like to me, that book was like the culmination of like, it was like his opus. It was like all of the things he'd finally been able to pull together. But everybody knows Zen and the Art of Motorcycle Maintenance. It's just like any other writer or like director where it's like everybody loves this film, and then they're like, no, the real good one was like over there. Like why don't you guys see that? But yeah, check that book out for sure. Now I'm like, I need like a books talk podcast. I'm just gonna do all sorts of them.
Yeah, like a little spin-off.
Yeah. Strange books worth reading.
Yeah.
Kind of matches.
First episode.
Yeah.
Would be motorcycle maintenance.
Right. Yeah, I'm always thinking about it. I love podcasts, and
you could just do an Audible book and just read it, and then just put it out there.
Just read
the like people who have like I have ADD pretty bad, so to get through books is kind of grueling sometimes.
Is
Even
that-
if they're like super interesting, it's hard for me to.
Do you do audiobooks at all?
Yeah, so that's why I mentioned that, because a lot of people like audiobooks because you can kind of, like you can work here and
Right.
listen to an audiobook
Yeah.
and still get the same.
That's why
like-
I'm all in audiobooks and podcasts.
Yeah,
I listen
and the
to-
same thing with podcasts too. Like instead of, if you don't want to listen to music, you can just
Right.
tune in and learn something.
Andrea makes so much fun of me because when I listen to audiobooks, I find myself, I can get way more into what I'm listening to if it's faster. And what I love about like Audible or Scribd is the other app I use, is that you can play it at 2 times speed. And so like if the
Oh.
book's going at 2 times speed, I'm definitely in it. If it's
Right.
going at 1 time speed, my brain will go in a million directions. It has to be fast enough to stop me from thinking about something else. And that really helps me too. But although I don't have ADD or anything,
Yeah.
fortunately, I don't think so, at least fortunately. But you've sat down and had an over an hour conversation with me, so
Yeah,
you must
yeah,
be
no, it's not.
itching.
No.
I'm driving you
Just
crazy.
like, I gotta get out of here.
Yeah. Okay. Well, the only other thing I really love to ask everybody about, and I hopefully will get to ask this question a lot while I'm in San Antonio, is just what is it that you love about this place? For anybody who's traveling, or maybe someone listens to this and is like, man, I could see myself living in San Antonio. Like, what are the things that you absolutely love about this place that you can kind of pass on to the rest of the world?
Just for like visiting, or
Whatever.
I
way.
mean, San Antonio, it's for in my experience, it's the culture is so rich, and also the community is so rich. Like, I mean, the food is incredible here. You can literally have. There's a spot on the west side that do empanadas, and they're a family from Argentina, and they just opened up a small shop, and they just make empanadas for $4. There's a lot of people from out of town, when you mention you're from San Antonio, that immediately just say like, oh, the Alamo or the Riverwalk is there.
Right.
And like anyone who lives in San Antonio, I mean, people that I know like never go down there.
Yeah. Right.
But so like the cool things are really like outside of the downtown area, like all the little hidden spots, and it's kind of, on the surface it seems kind of like a sleepy city, especially when because it gets compared to Austin so much because they're so close.
Yeah.
And Austin's like the complete opposite of San Antonio.
That place is.
And not many people know like San Antonio is a
Hopping.
lot bigger than Austin.
It seems like it.
Austin's pretty small,
Yeah.
but it's just like dense.
They have the numbers right now.
Yeah.
Because I've seen the reports about how they're growing faster than any city in the U.S.
Oh,
It's just
yeah,
like,
they're
you can see
slamming.
where people are flocking
Yeah.
there, which I get. It's a cool place.
Yeah, and then San Antonio. I mean, we're right now. We're literally. I mean, you could walk to downtown from here. Probably take like 10 minutes.
Right.
And I've never really been in a city before where you could walk downtown in 10 minutes and you're in a neighborhood that seems like you're out in the suburbs.
You know what? Denver feels a bit like that. I'll
Oh.
give Denver that credit because there's a lot of really nice. It's a lot of residential,
Yeah.
like right around the city, and so it gets pretty quiet if you can just barely get out of the city.
Yeah.
But other than that, I do think it's a rare thing.
There's a lot to do. I've never been, but there's that like, I don't know what they call it, like the sensory tank.
The deprivation
place.
tank.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I've never been, but I've heard that's really cool.
I'm going. You want to go with me?
Yeah, I'm down.
Let's do
You're
it.
here for 2 weeks, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, let's do it.
That'd be cool. We could. We do another episode just about that afterward.
Yeah. I have a friend who did that, and he was like, it was pretty wild.
Don't bail on me on this one.
No, I've been meaning
You
to
can
do
bail
it
on me
since
if you want, but I'm dead serious. Like I'm going. While
Yeah,
I'm
because
here.
it seems crazy. Like you're in a bathtub that's filled with salt, so you're just floating,
you
and they
float
turn the
'cause it's
lights
the
out.
salinity. Yeah, and then it's just.
Yeah, and then
dead
you're in
silent.
there for, I don't know however long.
You know
but-
what? The one thing I think I would really like, because I've heard about this, and I feel like I'm gonna have a bunch of ideas while I'm in there, and just start going nuts if I can't.
Oh yeah,
save 'em
ADD's gonna
somehow.
stay.
But I hear about people taking like voice recorders in with them.
Uh-huh.
Now I think that'd be really cool because if you're like, whoa, I just unlocked a big thing for my business, like
Right.
I never realized it because I've never been able to shut it all down before.
Yeah, and then you gotta wait another hour before you can get out. And then
If you can
and then
remember
forget it.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, that
could be an episode in itself. Just whatever crazy thoughts I have while I'm in there.
yeah. Just bring a little voice recorder, set it on the side. I feel like I'd fall asleep.
It
in that
seems
thing.
mildly psychedelic. It really does.
Yeah.
People talk about doing psychedelics and then doing it, which is
That-
not my MO, but
Yeah, that sounds like it would be a whole different level.
yeah.
You'd be on a different planet.
Yeah. Like for real, you'd
Like
be on an
literally.
actually different planet. Like that would be odd. No, I really do want to do it while I'm here because it's not super widespread, and from what I saw, especially in places where there's a few different places, much better rates of doing it. So if you
Right.
go to a city where there's only like one, they can charge as much as they want.
Oh yeah.
But around here, I don't think it's too expensive because there's like 2-3 places, or maybe even 4 places that do it.
Yeah.
So that's what I'm going to be doing. Yeah, we should think about this. 'Cause
Yeah.
I could see an episode about it. I don't even know if it fits this podcast because the point of this is like the whole travel thing, but it'd be like a little addendum.
Yeah, like a little side
Extra.
note.
Yeah. All right, man. Cool. Anything else you wanna mention to the people who have been enjoying this episode so far?
Not really. I mean, thanks for having me on here.
Totally.
And hitting me up about it.
Yeah, absolutely. So where can people find you so they can follow along?
The easiest place is Instagram. It's citizen_build. That is the easiest
That's the
place.
place
We
to
have
go.
we have a website too, but it doesn't get too much traffic. I mean, Instagram is such a hub right now
Yeah.
that it's the kind of the best platform to show everything on.
I love it. So I'll have that handle in the episode description, depending on where you're listening to this at. And I'm also going to take some pictures before we head out, so find those pictures on my Instagram, as always, at @THicksonLife. And the new thing I'm doing for everybody out there is I'm really trying to build up the Twitter game, because I know that, so I find a lot of people through Instagram as I'm traveling, but that's tricky and it takes me a long time. It'd be really cool if I had some ability to build a bit of a community and say, okay, I'm going to this place. Does anybody know anybody in this town? So if you're on Twitter or you like Twitter, go ahead and follow me there too. It's at @THicksonLife. I won't post too spammy of things, just weird Robert Persig quotes probably. And then you can kind of get in on the action and let me know if you know someone in a place I'm going, or if you are in a place I'm going and want to be on the show. I'm very open to that. Only requirement on the show is just to be fun, just to have a good time.
Yeah, that was fun.
Yeah.
That's super cool.
So thank you once again, Oliver, for being on the show, and thanks to the Citizen building that we're in right now.
Yeah.
And enjoy the pictures. Hope everybody enjoyed this episode, and we will see you on the next episode.